I would probably say that dogs are humans before we start getting nasty or whatever. I mean, if this one attacks another dog, or if another dog attacks them, within 2 minutes, the other dog will come up and try and play again. I just think that a lot of the things that people are trying to impose, like saying, because you're from a different culture, you've got different ethics, you've got different values, different morals, we need to treat you differently, and it's actually not the case. If someone doesn't want to play along by the rules, then they won't. It's nothing to do with their culture, it's just the person that they are.
The reality is for all of us that we're hardwired for similarity, not for difference. In other words, we're more comfortable with people who are like us than we are with people who are different to us. And we can learn to be open to differences, but these differences trigger a very old part of our brain, the limbic system. It's the fight or flight part of our brain where we're confronted with a difference and we think, well, is this okay? Is this not okay? How do I deal with this? And the more different someone is, the harder it is for our brain to process the information. And then, well, there's a majority of one kind of person and a minority of another. And what's the dynamics of that? And we know that the majority tends to drive how things work and how things operate. What are the norms of how we behave towards each other? And that's very much the majority. So here we are in Australia, and there are cultural norms about how we operate that are really dictated by the majority, which is white Australians in this country. Then we make assumptions about people who are different, and we have biases, positive and negative. Some differences we're drawn to, a lot of differences we're seeing in more of a negative way, and so then we need to unpack what those are. And once we've done that, we can look at, well, who's included and who's excluded, and why is that? So it's worth asking, what is cultural diversity, and then what is culture? Culture is something that we learn. So if you think about it, there's human nature. If we're born as a human, there are things that we all share. We all eat, we all have emotions, but how we eat and what we eat and how we express our emotions are very different from culture to culture. And so when we're talking about cultural diversity, one of the ways I like to think about it is that it's a collective programming of the mind. We learn our culture from our parents, and they learn it from their parents, and on and on. So we're carrying thousands of generations of cultural programming. And as we're growing up, we're learning, how do we do things? Do we cry in public or not? Do we even express our emotions? All kinds of little things make up our cultural programming. And that's how culture works. We don't actually think about how we do things, we just do them. It's only when we run into another culture and see people doing things differently that we get a little bit surprised. And then what happens is we make assumptions about other people based on our own cultural programming, and often we'll make mistakes. We'll misinterpret what someone else is doing, or we won't understand why do they behave the way they do, whereas it's just part of their cultural programming, which is different to ours. So here's the good news. When we spend more time with someone who is different to ourselves, and particularly if we have a shared interest, and we focus on that interest, we start to see the other person as a person rather than a person from a different culture, for example. So the differences start to drop away the more time we spend with that other person. And that's really the answer to this whole question of how do we create an inclusive environment